We're taking a look back at the biggest political turning points, trends, and controversies as we hit rewind on Rising. We've got the power players, scandals, and outrageous decisions that have defined our conversations.
Last summer, the Director of National Intelligence released a bombshell report that rocked the UFO community. It confirmed that vehicles of unknown origin and capability are operating on a reoccurring basis with seeming impunity and in restricted U.S. military airspace to boot. The report also cited 144 incidents since 2004 in which the U.S. military detected these enigmatic aircraft. And while the government is seemingly taking the issue seriously, there's one military branch that has seemed to have gone AWOL on the issue, the United States Air Force. Former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense Christopher Mellon joins us now to discuss. Christopher, thank you so much for joining the show. So first of all, why do you think the Air Force is not really saying much about this? I mean, this seems to be pretty big news.
Yeah, it's baffling. And from the beginning, it's been the U.S. Navy. It's been Navy videos. It's been Navy reports. They've been very quiet. There's been a traditional stigma in the Air Force. I think that's part of it. But this lack of responsiveness to this degree is rather baffling.
And do you think, what do you think explains that silence? Is it just is there genuinely something that is being covered up, or is it a kind of bureaucratic, well, we don't have to be transparent with you, who are you, we're the government, that kind of thing?
Yeah, so we don't know, but it does cause you to wonder if perhaps they're covering something up, because they released a report in 2015 identifying 1,800 incidents between 2010 and 2015 of unknown tracks of interest. Now this report comes forward and they seem to have virtually nothing to say and nothing to contribute. We know that F-15s have been scrambled. That's press reporting. We know that NORAD has hundreds of unknowns every year in the atmosphere and thousands in space. It's rather bizarre that they claim, the UAP task force, they're still trying to get information from the Air Force after all these months.
Hey, Christopher, when did you first get interested in this issue? What was it that got you into it?
I was a young boy and saw a home video that essentially a neighbor had made, and it showed a large UFO in broad daylight transiting through perfectly clear blue skies with just a few cumulus clouds. It went into one of those, disappeared, emerged out the other side, and it was stunning. I don't know what ever became of that, but that piqued my curiosity.
So as the former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense, I think us average people believe that people like you that have had these positions should know what these things are and should know whether or not we've been visited by aliens and if we've got some of the bodies hiding in Nevada. So what is it? I mean, really, I know it's kind of laughable, but I mean, that's what we think. So who would know what these phenomenon are? If there is somebody in the government, would it be the Air Force? Is that why they're mum about it? Do you think, well, they know what's going on here, or who would know?
That's a real possibility. And the sudden interest after a half a century of disinterest on the part of the American people, the American public, the sudden surge of interest from Congress has got them, it seems, in a very awkward position. And they seem to be struggling to determine what to say about it and how to say it and to whom.
And why? Like, why? Where does this struggle come from?
Undoubtedly, there are some classified sources that they're very skittish about, and so they have concerns about revealing that. I'm sure that's part of it. There's also traditional bureaucratic resistance in the Air Force to anything associated with this issue. For example, we have Air Force pilots flying in the same test ranges as Navy pilots. The Air Force pilots have better instrumentation. They're not reporting the UFOs that the Navy is seeing in the same places at the same general time.
When you say skittish classified sources, do you mean they're skittish about who these sources are and that they might not be reliable people, or that we're concerned about revealing who they are because they're sensitive?
I'm talking about technical sources and capabilities. So we have a massive space surveillance network and apparatus. And it defies belief to think that there have not been any unidentifieds tracked by that apparatus over such an extensive period of time. Certainly, if the Navy's had so many incidents, The Air Force must have had many, many more because they're looking at far larger areas with far greater fidelity all over the world.
What has been the most persuasive or intriguing thing that you came across while you were serving?
Well, at the time, there was an incredible taboo against this discussing this topic at all. I had a Navy officer call me up one time from a Navy base and describe an incident that had just occurred. He had witnessed the UFO himself. He spoke with the pilot. Right after he landed, the pilot wanted to get back in the jet and take off and chase this thing. And sort of elliptical, ovoid-shaped UFO had circled this U.S. Navy fighter aircraft in broad daylight over an Air Force base in Florida.
I think most people would have a hard time, understanding why the Navy and the Air Force are so not in sync on this. Why one, government, military institution is there? It's truly a cultural difference. Is that what you think it is?
I do. I also think it's a mission difference. So if you're the Navy, it's easier to talk about lapses in air defense than if you're the Air Force. That's an acknowledgement of mission failure, right? So if we
the
had
Air Force is going to be
submarines-
reporting sea creatures and the
right. Well, that's what this report is like. It's very strange. We have a report on UAPs that comes in. It's almost all Navy information. It would be like a report on mysterious submarines off the coast of the United States, where all the reporting is Air Force and there's nothing from the Navy.
There's no shame in getting your airspace invaded by an alien. Well, why do they think that they're going to get hauled before Congress and be like, how did you allow these aliens to get into your zone outside Hawaii or whatever?
There are a lot of unanswered questions that are due, I think, and they're going to be receiving most likely from Capitol Hill. And some of them will be along those lines. How is this happening? Why is this happening? Some of it's going to be, why have you not been more forthcoming about this information and sharing this information? So I think there are quite a range of questions that remain unanswered.
We're going to find out we were subsidizing the aliens.
Yeah.
we're authorizing NIH experiments there.
Oh, is that what
They were
it is?
trained at the School of
These are
Americas.
lab creatures that are now super sophisticated.
Well, imagine for a second that you do have something very sensitive that you're trying to conceal, and Congress is asking you for information about that general topic. You want to be responsive, but you also want to protect that information. How do you square that circle?
Right,
And
you'd be
so
very
I
vague.
think that's part of the problem they're confronted with.
So can you tell us from your perspective, what's the chance that these unidentified aerial phenomenon, they are our own military, maybe our own secret weaponry, maybe being developed even in the private sector alongside the military? What are the chances it's a foreign military versus the chances that it's actual alien?
Well, it's very interesting. The report submitted by the Director of National Intelligence said we see no evidence that it's from a foreign government. None of the instances, the 144 incidents they identified, could be explained by U.S. classified research programs. So that leaves you wondering then what hypothesis best fits the facts. And frankly, the alien hypothesis fits the facts better than the alternatives. I'm afraid I have to say that.
That's exciting. I know Robbie doesn't believe it, but
I'm not questioning our subject matter expert. I haven't seen any evidence, and I'm innately skeptical of it. But no, there it is.
It's good to be skeptical. That's the appropriate position scientifically. We should be skeptical and continue to be.
And again, if our subject matter expert thinks that's the most likely explanation, I want to hear that actually said, rather than danced around and be like, well, we don't really know. Who knows what it could be? So
I mean, the good news is, look, if it is alien, and we've been having these aliens visiting us for the last 20 years that we know of, that we have documentation of, probably much longer than that. If we go back to all of the people who've made claims, then they're benevolent, right? Or at least they're not hostile.
They haven't killed us
Otherwise,
yet.
they would have. Right. So so to me, it's exciting. It's not something to fear. It's exciting, unless they're playing the long game and they're just waiting to attack us. They're like plotting out because they live 1,000 years. We only live like 70 and they live 1,000. And so they're waiting for their attack. I don't know. But otherwise, I think it's kind of exciting.
I think they're probably messing with our elections.
Maybe it's them.
This goes back to at least World War II, and the reason we're concerned about it from a national security standpoint is so much of this activity is in and around military training and operating areas and military facilities. If they were just cruising through national parks or something, we'd have a lot less concern. But in some cases, they're swarming Navy ships, they're swarming Air Force bases, they're interrupting planned training operations. So that's why it becomes a concern from a national security standpoint.
Although some experts on this issue say that they believe that if it is alien, that they're actually preventing us from using nuclear weapons, that these sightings began after we started testing nuclear weapons and deploying nuclear weapons, and that they are in fact, they know something about how that affects maybe space better than we do, and they're coming in to kind of prevent us from doing this. That's one of the theories that has been out there, that they've been disarming even nuclear weapons. Maybe they're saving us from ourselves.
You're quite right. It's not just a theory. It's been testified to by numerous retired military officers, Air Force officers themselves. And yet, to my knowledge, Congress has never asked that question. That is hanging out there. It's a sensational claim. It should be easy to put it to rest one way or the other, but Congress has never asked the question.
Well, maybe I should go, be in Congress, start asking questions.
Well, Christopher Mellon, we really appreciate you joining us.
My pleasure. Thank you very much. Appreciate your interest in the subject.
Thank you. And more Rising right after this. Last June, the long-awaited report from the Department of Defense detailing the government's knowledge of UFOs and its programs trying to detect them and catalog them was released. And to the chagrin of many of the subject's enthusiasts, it was a bit underwhelming. The 9-page report stated it lacked sufficient data either way to confirm or deny whether or not objects reported by U.S. service members were of extraterrestrial origin. But new information has been revealed after BlackVault.com creator John Greenwald Jr. obtained a redacted version of the classified report, and he joins us now to discuss. Welcome.
I appreciate it. It's good to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. So tell us, what is the new information that was redacted? What does it reveal?
Sure. So we know when that report came out to us, the general public, Congress was given a report themselves in a classified setting. The unknown was exactly what it was going to entail. So I filed a case the next morning after we got the public version to get that released. It took until now to actually get it released, heavily redacted, but it does offer a little bit of a glimpse into what Congress saw in a classified setting and how the UFO phenomena is not easily explainable. Even though the public report told us that, it goes into greater detail about various military pilots encountering UAPs, exhibiting technology that we don't have, a identification that we can't peg. This phenomena, whatever it is definitely real, and it's plaguing military pilots. And this new document released, which again was given to Congress in that classified setting, gives more of a glimpse of what really is there when it comes to the phenomena and how they can't explain it.
And what are the best explanations, and how would you rank them? And and how do those explanations change based on this new information?
Sure. What's interesting is when you talk about the explanation, skeptics, debunkers, if you want to call them that, come out and say, well, it could be classified technology or drones or stuff like that. What's interesting about this is they investigated 144 cases, and they could not put 143 of them in any category that they came up with. They were only able to explain one, which was a balloon. The other explanations, they said, were potentially classified systems from our own military or a foreign adversary, but they weren't able to identify any of the cases they investigated into those categories. So even though those mundane explanations exist, and I think any investigator would acknowledge that, what's interesting is with the resources of the U.S. military, they couldn't put them in those categories. So you have those possible explanations, but the military wasn't able to definitively say these fit into a classified platform or foreign adversary drone technology, because you can admit that without blowing any classified secrets, yet they weren't able to do it. So it's a short list of what's left. I mean, the general public wants to know, hey, is this alien? Well, of course, you're not going to see that in the report, nor do you. But they didn't rule it out, and they said that last year, and this report solidifies that that's on the short list of possible explanations.
Travis.
Thanks, John. I wanted to ask you about this new UAP office that was created by Deputy Secretary Hicks and announced last week. The Aerial Object Identification and Management Synchronization Group. Was there it's a mouthful. Was there any coordination with lawmakers on Capitol Hill? They're proposing related legislation like Representative Gallego and Senator Gillibrand. And secondly, some former Pentagon officials who had worked on this issue, Chris Mellon and Lou Elizondo, have said that this is an effort for the Pentagon to be less transparent on UAPs. And I was just wondering if you had any response to that.
On the first one, I can't speak to pending legislation. Obviously, I'd refer to those members, but we absolutely kept members of Congress informed as we fashioned this group together and announced it. And it is, to your second question, it is really designed to help us better coordinate the reporting processes, the actual reports themselves, and the analysis of those reports, so that rather than getting them sort of piecemeal and ad hoc as we've been getting them from the services, this is a way to coordinate the input so that we can. There's a common set of parameters for how to report them and to analyze them, and then to assess what we've got. And not all reports are going to manifest themselves in something that we consider a national security threat. So this is a chance for us to be a much more organized in the way we process these reports. And as we will certainly continue to be as transparent as we can about these phenomena and the impact that they may or may not be having on our ability to operate.
Yeah, there's that, which obviously, right, that would be exciting. That's what people want to hear, evidence found, et cetera. So that's one thing. But, the other, in many ways, the more legitimate thing, I think the lack of transparency around these issues, the government, just not sharing what it knows. Is this, more evidence that no matter how pressed or how pushed they are, they're still not going to take this question take the question of telling the public what they do know seriously?
Well, absolutely. And this document, although discouraging that it is heavily redacted, absolutely solidifies the secrecy around this phenomena, whatever it is. It likely has multiple explanations, and ironically, the report reflects that as well. But it likely has multiple explanations. But the bottom line is the military and the U.S. government has a secret here, and they don't want to tell the general public about it. And you look at all these redactions, and again, although discouraging, that in itself tells a story. And when you really sit down and digest the document, some may theorize, this is just about our classified system platforms that detected whatever these craft are. And you can see in certain areas, yes, that is likely the explanation for the redactions. But when you really look at some of the other areas, they don't want to tell you the capabilities of what these UAP are, these mysterious unknown craft. And the explanation to that would not be classified, in my opinion. We know our systems can detect speeds, can detect altitudes, so that's not classified. They won't tell you where UAPs are flying or how fast. I don't think that should be classified, yet it is. Another key section is what they look like. They label it common shapes, and then another area is uncommon shapes. That's entirely redacted as well. They won't even tell you the visual representation of what these craft look like. So let's say we are dealing with a drone type of technology. Well, there's only so many shapes a drone can be, and is that in itself, without any identifying information on a diagram or a picture, without any identifying information, is that classified? My answer would be no. Yet they won't tell you a single visual observation on what shape these are. So it really solidifies the secrecy behind what these UAP really are.
And outside of this document, do we have a sense, or do you have a guess what they mean by common shapes?
Well, I take that as the 144 reports that they investigated, or incidents that they investigated. There was a common trait between a lot of them that were within the shape. So that's how I read that. That's how I define that at this point.
But
of course, it's all.
Yeah.
It's
but
all
no sense of
crafty.
what that is.
No sense what it is.
Right.
And that begs the question, why? Why is simply a shape of a vehicle a threat to national security if they tell the general public? What could that reveal? And for me, I don't have an answer to that, but it's an intriguing question, because it really then, not to beat the dead horse, but it solidifies the secrecy behind something that for decades the U.S. military and government denied really even existed. Now they admit it exists. They admit they're investigating it, but they won't tell you a darn thing about it. And that's what keeps me kind of going and pushing for answers.
Well, John, thank you so much for joining us.
It is my pleasure. Thanks for inviting me.
We'll have more Rising coming up next.
Decorated former combat veteran David Grush went public last week with claims that the U.S. has a decades-old UFO retrieval program. Grush also dropped the bombshell allegation that people have been killed by, quote, non-human intelligences. Here he is on News Nation. Let's watch.
We're definitely not alone. Absolutely, the data points empirically that we're not alone, yeah.
Do we have bodies? Do we have species of
Well,
non-human?
naturally, when you recover something that's either landed or crashed, sometimes you encounter dead pilots. And believe it or not, as fantastical as that sounds, it's true.
Grush, who previously worked as a representative for the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, where his job was to help investigate UFOs, also said recently, quote, "I think the logical fallacy there is because they're advanced, they're kind, we'll never really understand their full intent, and that's because we're not them. But I think what appears to be malevolent activity has happened. That's based on nuclear site probing activities and witness testimony." Grush went further, saying the U.S. would do anything, including killing people, in an effort to keep this secret.
Yeah, so I'm fascinated by this. I don't mean to nerd out again, but this idea that we can perceive beings as malevolent because we don't understand their behavior is a core principle of Star Trek, and why the Prime Directive is so important, the non-interference principle. An early episode with this thing they called the crystalline entity. This thing was going around, destroying planets, causing chaos, this big crystal rock-like thing in space, and they realized, this happens a lot in Star Trek, oh, it's just trying to feed. Oh, it's just trying to eat. Oh, it doesn't really realize what it's doing or the impact it's having on other species. And it would be interesting to interrogate whether or not, I mean, this is also the doomsday scenario of so many sci-fi movies. An alien comes, a human overreacts, shoots them, et cetera, and now we're in an intergalactic war. So there is something, I think, kind of satisfying and interesting about someone contemplating that it would be actually difficult to judge the intent of a UFO or
what are the odds
ET?
we encounter or they come here to encounter us, an alien or extra-dimensional or extraterrestrial, a non-human intelligence, but that is like within the ballpark of our intelligence level? What I mean is, like, they're interested in our nuclear stuff. Like ants don't have any relationship to human beings. Like, ants don't go about their lives thinking, what do the human beings think, right?
They're pretty interested in our picnic having behavior.
But we're not perceivable to the ants. We're so different and distinct.
But isn't that kind of the
point? It will be like that with aliens.
I think that's exactly what we're saying. That me and Grush is what we're talking about, is the idea that because ants don't perceive us, and we largely don't pay attention to ants, there are behaviors that we engage in that really have nothing to do with the ants, but that are harmful to them. Let's say we build a condo and it digs up an anthill, right. And there are behaviors that they have that are at least irritating to us, if not harmful. There's fire ants and more dangerous kinds of ants. But it's not really about us. They're just protecting their territory or trying to come to their kitchen for snacks or whatever it is. So I think that's a really significant possibility.
But what is being suggested is a similar level. Oh, they have crafts they're recognizably non-human, but we can kind of see that they're spaceships. They're interested in our nuclear secrets. That's like that's like encountering like another country or something, or a human species, like a similar Earth-like planet with similar. Do you know what I mean? That's too close to like what our intelligence and interests and how we do things is. Like a genuine alien will be like, it might not even be perceptible to the human in the way that. In the way that microscopic organisms are not perceptible to us.
That's a fascinating point, because Grush also weighed in on that. This is from an article in New York Magazine that is a skeptic of Grush and has tabulated what it considers to be more of his outlandish claims. One of them says, I don't want to necessarily denote origin. I don't think we have all the data to say, oh, they're coming from a certain location. He proposed the vehicles the Pentagon is hiding could have come from a different physical dimension as described in quantum mechanics, saying we know there are extra dimensions due to high energy particle collisions, etc., and there's a theoretical framework to explain that. Does that help? Does that help for you, or does that make it worse?
No, I think that's all possible, but that does not at all, to me, resemble what we're talking about when we're talking about flying objects people have seen and recovered pieces of ships and technology and weird glimpses of things in the desert or where else. That is very different, and thus I think largely a hoax and not true. When an actual alien presence will be as different to us. It'll be like a shadow or an ink blot, or something. It'll come from it'll not be something we can even it'll be so foreign, so different to anything that it's almost like beyond our imagination.
Yeah, I really like that. Some people have critiqued, Star Trek and other sci-fi shows for this like humanoid paradox. Yeah. Why does every alien basically look a human with makeup on?
Well, because the costume design was not very good with Star Trek.
Right, we didn't have sci-fi. They didn't have special effects rather back then, where you could have like blobs of clouds moving through the hallways or whatever. Yeah. But the way they do try to explain it in Star Trek, one of my favorite episodes, there's an arms race. There's this message embedded that somebody finds in an archaeological dig somewhere, and everyone's looking for it. The Federation is trying to get at it because they think it's like a fun artifact. The Klingons are going after it because they think it's a weapon. So are the Romulans. Everyone's chasing this thing through space, and when they find it, spoiler alert for a 30-year-old episode of TV, they discover that an old alien race that died out like millennia before any of us evolved out of the primordial soup knew its race was dying out and scattered its DNA across the galaxy, causing everybody to evolve in the same way.
You have to come up with some kind of explanation along those lines, or else it would be...
But Grush, I will say, he's not claiming like little green men or something that just looks like a human in makeup or a small child in makeup. I think that what he's been talking about does contemplate other dimensions, non-human corporeal forms, non-corporeal forms, and he's been very clear again that he has not personally laid eyes on any of this. He was told by a source about the reality of some of this stuff. I also want to push back, Robbie. I saw some interesting pushback against some of your points.
Go ahead.
Some of your points from the last UFO segment. You mentioned that it was incredible to you that aliens would only have landed in the United States and only in rural areas, and what are the odds, et cetera, et cetera. It's worth noting that Grush says the first UFO case he was briefed on involved a vehicle downed in Italy in 1933, decidedly not America. The Mussolini government had allegedly kept it in storage to the end of World War II. Pope Pius VII back-channeled the existence of the object to the United States, which it obtained in 1944 or 1945. So the argument is...
Was that one of the sequels to the Da Vinci Code, or is that a real thing that happened?
They're gonna eat you.
I know. Look, you have to... I'm just expressing my skepticism of, all these subjects. Or maybe there's another dimension, and evil Robbie from dimension 19684X crossed here, killed and replaced the real Robbie, and is trying to throw you off the set.
I think that's likely. I also love that you're Scully and I'm Mulder in this dynamic.
Wonderful. More Rising right after this.
More UFO secrets? According to investigative journalist Ross Coulthart, 3 sources have told him that there was an undisclosed encounter over the Arctic Circle on February 1st, 2023, with NORAD organizing fighter jets being sent to take the object down 3 days before the Chinese spy balloon was shot down in U.S. airspace. Let's watch.
3 sources tell me there was an earlier, publicly undisclosed incident over the Arctic Circle on the 1st of February, 3 days before the Chinese balloon shoot-down. These defence and intelligence sources revealing to NewsNation 8 or 9 UAPs were detected over the Arctic Circle and that fighter jets were sent up in what was an unsuccessful attempt to intercept them. Former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defence Christopher Mellon has independently confirmed the same story.
Fighter jets were deployed from NORAD to engage with those objects and that they were seen to manoeuvre away, apparently at high speed. Have you heard those allegations? I've heard it now from 3 different people.
Yeah, I've heard the same thing, and from an individual who would have plausible reason to know. But this really speaks to a much larger issue, which is the lack of information from the Air Force about UAP generally.
Let's hear some more on this same incident.
Did they find the object, the pieces of the object they shot down?
No, ma'am, they did not. In fact, it's a continuing mystery. 6 months on, the public's been told nothing. We've been told that they didn't find anything, even though the New York Times and other institutions were reporting at the time that the sea ice was frozen and that it was quite clear, there was very clear open conditions that day. The conditions were perfect for recovery. And moreover, it was reported in media that there was something anomalous about the Alaska object in particular. This is an ongoing mystery, Elizabeth. We just don't know, and I think the public's got a right to know what happened, and the Pentagon has indicated it's soon about to start releasing some of the shoot-down vision.
NORAD has denied the incident, saying the jets were on a training operation. So I don't know what to make of this, right? It could be the spy balloon. If it was the spy balloon, why did they ignore it? If they were only going to shoot it down later, why would they let it fly over the United States before they shot it down? Seems like because it was anomalous, it wasn't the balloon. I don't know if I trust NORAD. If you have children at home and you're watching or listening, pause here, but NORAD does this thing every Christmas where they're like, we have GPS on Santa Claus and we're tracking Santa Claus and this is where he is. He's coming to your house. What a lie. That was a lie. And you tricked me and I'm upset about that, NORAD. I don't buy it. How can Santa be real but aliens aren't? Bad organization. Don't like them.
I think the problem we have now is because the Department of Defense and other government intelligence sources have been found to be incredibly dishonest about UAPs in the past and have tried to discredit the sources who are talking about it, that no one is going to believe them now when there is a legitimate training exercise and that is a legitimate excuse for what happened. So it very well could be that this was just a training exercise, as they say, but I am not inclined to believe them now at this point because they have lost so much trust from the American public because of the lies that they've told. So I don't know how much stock I put into this particular reporting. I'd be curious to hear the sources characterized more. He said 3 people, 3 sources, but didn't go much beyond that in terms of telling us who they are and how they would have access to this information. So I would have liked to see a little bit more detail in that reporting on air that we heard before I make any judgments on the accuracy of the information. But the fact that there were 2 journalists who independently confirmed this incident occurred was interesting to me.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting. The protection of sources in the case of UAP reporting has become really fascinating because you have all of these documentaries on the History Channel where they interview people who have been career folks working in the Defense Department or what have you that have all of these things to say. But what's so unique about the state we're in right now is you have people that seemingly are currently serving in office. They're either, in the State Department, and they're an employee of the State Department, they're in NORAD, and they're speaking to reporters, which I think is really interesting. But you have Tim Burchett, an elected official, going in a skiff and finding out basically nothing at all. It sounds to me like the if you call them whistleblowers or the sources for a lot of David Grush's reporting, I really believe them. You have independent reporters confirming with the sources as well and other sources
the statements. And so now we're in a place where the public knows it's true, and the Defense Department brings Burchett in a skiff essentially to waste everyone's time and get our hopes up. I think just having the incident undisclosed initially means that there was something going on. You're absolutely right. That sows mistrust. We know something was going on. Why didn't you tell us about it initially? Because it could have been a training exercise. And if it was a training exercise, just say it. Because it sounds like the only reason someone would speak out about it is because it was unusual.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I think that's right. And in terms of the protection of sources, it's also important to remember that these people have been subject to really quite harsh attacks on their character and questioning even their sanity. There was that article with leaks to The Intercept against David Grush, where he was basically accused of being mentally unstable, mentally unwell, of being an alcoholic, perhaps a domestic abuser, and used incidents from his past as a way to discredit him and what he's saying now about UFOs and UAPs. And that's the level that the government is willing to stoop to keep this information under wraps. And we know that David Grush, after he testified to Congress in their now infamous UFO hearing, he said that he would show information because most of his sources are secondhand, I believe. He said that he would actually give the names of these people who were speaking to him about this phenomena to members of Congress who had the authorization, and also that he would show them in the skiff some of these materials. And then the skiff that Tim Burchett went into, as you said, didn't really garner much of anything. And apparently, the Congress people who are interested in following up on David Grush's claims don't have the appropriate clearance to actually access some of the information that he wants to provide to them. So they're stuck in this sort of holding pattern right now where they want more information. David Grush wants to provide it, and yet there's this security obstacle to being able to actually get it to them. And it's really a shame how I think the government does a lot of overclassification of materials that are of public interest intentionally, so that people can't, not even just the American public, but the fact that a congressperson couldn't access it is telling.
Insane. I think that, you know, the famous meme of the guy with the messed up hair and the History Channel logo, and it says aliens.
Heck yeah.
My theory is that that was a psyop. It was a psyop by the people protecting the information about UAPs.
Yeah.
And they spread this everywhere so that you wouldn't watch the History Channel at 2 a.m. And now, if you believe those guys, they were crazy, and you must be crazy for believing them because they have weird, funky hair and they talk about aliens. They had to discredit Grush because members of Congress wanted to have him on and talk to him. And he sounds very credible.
Right.
He doesn't seem like, ooh, aliens, conspiracy guy. No, he sounds credible, and members of Congress have taken interest in him, so they had to find something else. Obviously, there was a tip that he had this, you know, history of mental health problems, which were not severe. He was very clearly, you know, struggling with some depression, which is kind of common. And so for the Intercept to take that and report on it, it just feels wrong. And I think about the tension between the bureaucracy and elected members of Congress. I always thought, or maybe I hoped, that the issue that would bring things to a head would be funding the federal government. That when Congress votes on a budget and votes to spend dollars, that if there's a tension between them and the Federal Reserve wanting to maintain the debt ceiling, and you have the Biden administration or whoever's president, maybe it's Trump, they say, no, you have to issue the dollars. Like, you respond to us, we're the elected leaders. I thought that would be the main issue, where we see the bureaucracy brushing up against our elected officials, but it very well could be UFOs, UAPs. Why is Burchett not being given the highest level of security clearance to receive all of the information and documents that the Pentagon has?
Yeah, it's quite literally why we elect these people, is to be able to get access to this information and conduct investigations and hopefully give that information to the public. And that's just not happening here. And the government has a history, too, of denying FOIA requests related to this. And I'm sensitive to the fact that in some of these incidents, the government does have an interest in protecting certain technologies. They want to protect in the cases where perhaps foreign governments are involved. They don't want to give away the fact that maybe a foreign government has greater technology than the United States does. However, when you have independent journalists like we had Michael Schellenberger on this program talking about sources explaining that they had actually recovered UAP craft with potentially physical non-human remains inside, non-human pilots, we're at a point now where we have to err on the side of transparency because the people deserve to know how much of this is real, if any, and what the government intends to do in terms of a protection, potentially, of the American people, if necessary, from these non-human things, I guess you could say.
Yeah, we have to err on the side of transparency. And the rest of this segment is redacted per request of the Pentagon. Just kidding. More rising after this.